Hockey Podcast. We are the Handsome Hockey Podcast here for episode 28, which is sponsored by nobody. We ain't got sponsor clout yet. If you want to sponsor us, hit us up, handsomehockeypod@gmail.com. Even if you want to just give us things, that's fine too. We are not taking donations of COVID though.
Check out our OnlyFans.
Nobody wants to see our OnlyFans. Not even our significant others.
Safe for work.
Yeah, it's just me in a t-shirt hanging out.
Just pasty white boys in the sun.
It's like $4.99 for this picture of Jake standing, fully clothed.
Sell our NFTs.
You know, we're all just giving money to the man.
Yeah, that's what we do in America. We throw money at problems.
No, we throw money. We don't throw money at the right problems.
Yeah.
If you're in the South, you throw money at creating bills to ban trans athletes from participating in sports.
Right. Or keep black people from voting.
But if you're anywhere in the United States, you just allow the rampant buying, purchasing, using, and application of firearms.
Got a problem? Apply firearms to it.
Yeah. Does your neighbor's fence go too high? Shoot him in the fucking face.
Just add guns.
Yeah. I was going to say that we were going to try and tie this first little portion to hockey in some way.
I don't think we need
to. But I don't
think
think we're going to. I think what we're going to say is, you people and your fucking guns are the worst.
I mean, I understand, people have a right to own firearms, and there are lots of responsible gun owners out there.
You people aren't the problem.
Yeah.
Your friends are, though.
I mean, what? We just saw this shithead kid shoot up a FedEx facility with fully legally purchased assault rifles.
Or we watched a Chicago police officer murder a 13-year-old with his hands up in the air who was clearly unarmed.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out even people who are trained to use guns probably shouldn't be using guns.
Yeah, you can be a 26-year police force veteran and whoopsies, grabbed the wrong gun.
Yeah.
It's not a taser that's made of plastic and yellow and
significantly lighter and on your non-dominant hand. I understand that we have a culture of guns in the United States, but that culture of guns is caustic and violent. When you hear of people in nice neighborhoods who feel like they've got to be packing to walk their child to school.
I think of the Karen and her husband that came out with packing against the protesters in their gated community. And I'm sort of a gun owner myself, and I've enjoyed shooting in the past, but
how you're categorizing yourself as sort of a gun owner.
Well, it's my gun, but it's not here. It's back home at my mom's place. It's just my grandfather's old Untouchables style pump action 1912 shotgun.
Yeah, I get it. Guns are cool. I understand. I mean, I personally don't think guns are cool. I understand why people think they're cool. They make loud noise. It's the same reason we like fireworks. They make loud noises and you feel like you're in power when you have them.
Right. One of the reasons that the Black Panthers became what they were is they armed themselves against the tyrannical government and, protected.
Yeah, and that's why their leadership got fucking gunned down.
Right. Yeah. They made themselves enemies of the state. But
now the state is making itself an enemy of the people. We've been at this moment for a long time. Before we started recording today, Evan made a really good point that, these problems have always been there, but now they're in the faces of more Americans than just the people who are affected.
Mm-hmm.
The checks and balances that our country was formed upon, which were created specifically to keep white hegemony in power and in place, those checks and balances are now starting to be questioned. And the barriers that we used to have where the police were there to protect us have been shattered in white communities, because now we finally are seeing the pain and the suffering and the destruction that police power has created in communities of color.
Right. And a lot of it is because we've created sort of a perverse profit motive in policing. I mean, after World War II, there was a hot minute there where we were like legitimately trying to get rid of prisons and basically downsize police altogether. And I view our current crisis of policing as at least partially an offshoot of the forever war on terror and the fact that we can now launder any amount of military equipment into police hands for free.
It's also the 80s war on drugs, the crack epidemic. We've just had this series of things that we have said, you know what, police should take care of that. When in reality, those aren't things that the police are supposed to be taking care of whatsoever.
Yeah. And I listened to a really interesting podcast once about how the car has impacted policing. And like that was one of the reasons that we have police that ostensibly do traffic stops and police the way they do is because of the car.
But, we've had cars for 120 years at this point. Policing should have changed by this point.
Well, there are a number of reasons why it's kind of become what it is now. And I think picking up a profit motive along the way where, we want to grow our salaries, want to grow our police forces. We want to grow a natural offshoot of when you have a large amount of people with this job. I mean, yeah, police should be able to provide for themselves, but it shouldn't come on the back of like de facto taxes on impoverished communities like what we saw in Ferguson, where, you have this fucked up judicial system that is just ticketing the citizens of this municipality to death just because the police budget is predicated on the backs of handing out tickets and then like not telling people. And so they don't show up to court summonses. So they get fined up the wazoo because one letter didn't get sent or something. And I think that's the underlying problem is this incentive that we've created.
Well, we have a military industrial complex that ostensibly runs the country. We have a private prison complex that is contracted with the government. And if we don't fill quotas for those prisons, we owe them more money. And then we have a police force that is bloated by budget, bloated by responsibility, and has a massive influx of military grade weapons and given to them by free. Evan and I aren't saying that the job of being a police officer is easy.
No.
It's one of the most difficult jobs that we have.
And we've made it almost undoably hard in what we ask police to do. There are a lot of interesting proposals out there about taking the whole traffic side away from police and making that the domain of city transportation officials. And so then, like, if you have a problem intersection, like the one right out here, where cars flip over like it's their job, you can both address physical failings in city infrastructure and traffic problems without guns. We see a huge problem in policing just being guns at traffic stops.
The response to every altercation with a police officer shouldn't be predicated on the police officer having a gun.
Right. We understand that a gun naturally kind of makes you feel safe and in some circumstances does provide a measure of safety, but we just wield them too unnecessarily and poorly to keep doing what we're doing.
Well, in the Cold War, we had the idea of mutually assured destruction between the United States and Russia. We have just as many, if not more, nuclear warheads pointed at targets in your country as you do at our country. And you know what everybody was? Fucking terrified.
Yeah.
For 40 fucking years, the answer to the gun crisis in the United States is not, has never been, and should never be more guns.
Right.
We're at a point where good gun owners, like those who are trained with their weapons and are responsible with their weapons, their voices have been drowned out by people who were like, don't tread on me, Gadsden flag, bang, bang, bang.
NRA.
Yeah.
And that's because of the profit incentive, because these companies that make firearms are massively publicly traded companies that are beholden to their shareholders. And so they we've created a profit incentive there, as are the companies that create tanks and armaments and armor for the military. And we gave a huge backdoor directly to police forces with the 1033 and the 1122 initiatives that allow police to purchase new military equipment using their own funding with the same discounts that are given to the military. And the 1033 program allows the DoD to just transfer excess equipment to local law enforcement free of charge. And, these two programs aren't exactly very well administered. Like, this shit has just gone missing. Tanks and guns and blah, blah, blah. It is very a fungible thing.
Well, along with the lines of the militarization of American police forces after 9/11, which the idea that we were going to combat terrorism with police officers carrying assault rifles is fucking laughable. I hate to tell you this, but the NYPD wasn't going to stop two planes from smashing into the World Trade Towers. That's not how the war on terror works.
No, but SWAT teams were rolled out basically in response to one shooting in California where police were dramatically outgunned.
Yeah, by people who had body armor and assault rifles, which people shouldn't be able to fucking own.
Right. And since then, ownership of those two things has only exponentially increased. So, are we safer when we're more armed? No, absolutely not. The best communities in America are not the ones with the most armed cops. Like, they're the ones with the strongest social contracts. And as we see in Portland, if you have a police force that kind of betrays the social contract, crime then goes up. Like, the police can undo their own goodwill by fucking up.
Well, and we also, in a lot of communities, especially a lot of urban communities in the United States, the police officers aren't part of that community. They're coming in from elsewhere to police a community that they aren't a part of.
Right.
In Portland specific, most police officers don't live in fucking Portland. They live in Vancouver or Gresham or wherever they're coming from.
Yeah, it's something like 18% of PPB officers actually live here.
And so, you don't have the same amount of care about that community because it's not yours. It's the one where you get paid to go to.
Right. And a lot of people will say, don't shit where you eat, or don't eat where you shit. That's a great way to look at it.
Well, I'm not going to eat on the toilet, but
why not? It's just efficient.
If I'm going to be there all day, I don't have a very cushy toilet seat.
That's where you're fucking up. Yeah. You don't have have the old person padded vinyl seat.
I live in a 100-year-old. Yeah, talk about the grossest things we've ever decided upon as a country. The padded toilet seat is way up there. As I listen to us talk here, I've noticed that we have gone on various different tangents throughout the last 15 to 20 minutes. What that really points to is there are so many problems and the system is broken. Mm-hmm. As a country, we need to defund the police and make them more efficient, allow them to do the job that they're supposed to do, and pay people to do the other jobs, the welfare jobs, to do what they're trained to do, what they've gone to college to do, to become mental health professionals, to become healthcare workers, to become social workers. There are people in the world who have gone to school to do that. Most of them are not cops.
Right. And, a lot of people push back on the will to defund police and say, well, aren't you just going to enable crime? But what prevents crime in the first place is using these police funds instead of as kind of a cleanup crew, as police inevitably are. You can prevent crime by housing people, providing them mental health services, giving people jobs. The cost of a cop, you can house a family for a year in Portland. Or, we can spend that money better, but we have been conditioned and grown too afraid. And so we put our money towards this armed police force that has shown that they're reckless.
It's time to be proactive instead of reactionary.
Mm-hmm.
Military grade weapons in the hands of untrained police officers is a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
If we start spending money to stop these problems from happening before they start, we don't need tanks rolling down the streets of American cities.
Yeah.
We just need a well-trained, responsive, and flexible police force that includes mental health professionals, social workers, healthcare professionals. It shouldn't be just the thin blue line. It should be a blue line surrounded by an army, a veritable army of trained professionals to help crisis situations before they start and once they arise.
Yeah, and this is, in my eyes, many ways, just a consequence of how we've hollowed out our tax base and basically pushed, a neoconservative, neoliberal austerity on our society. Under Ronald Reagan, we completely defunded the mental health system that we had for the state and just basically put a bunch of crazy people on the street, and then essentially turned around and declared war on them when they wanted to do drugs and survive and, make money by selling drugs or use drugs to...
Or commit crimes in order to get money to use more drugs.
Right, which is exactly what we see happening, in COVID, and this sort of spike in violence that we see in Portland and in across the U.S. It's not because we got rid of a very small detail of gang liaisons that, still are on the force. No, it's because people lost their jobs. People are desperate. They're turning to drugs and violence and the black market to make their ends meet, because the state has completely failed to support a whole swath of people in this, pandemic, when we're keeping people from working, but we're also then not turning around and giving them the money to survive.
I guess in short, let's be more compassionate. Let's defund and reinvest money that goes to a militarized police force. And until we get to that point, for the love of fucking God, can we stop murdering black and brown people in cold blood in the streets of America?
Yeah, it's an absolute travesty. It'll ruins my whole fucking week to hear that a 13-year-old kid has been gunned down in Chicago, a city that I love. And you get the sense that there's still a critical mass of people kind of getting irritated enough with this position to do something about it, but it's taking too goddamn long.
And for fuck's sake, let's hold these people responsible. Mm-hmm. What's her name? Something Potter in Minneapolis, who just murdered Deontay Wright, is getting charged with manslaughter.
And
Derek Chauvin is on trial for second-degree murder when he put his knee into a man's throat and for 8 minutes, and it's on video.
I mean, I still think that is an appropriate charge, because if you overcharge somebody, then they have an easier way to escape, and that's been a historic way that these police officers have gone unpunished for things like this. Is you'll have a prosecutor that saddles a charge that he can't actually prove on this guy. And so they basically do a show trial and somebody walks. So, I mean, while, second degree murder doesn't sound like first degree murder, but first degree murder implies premeditation. Second degree murder is probably an appropriate charge, as is manslaughter for, this woman in outside of Minneapolis. And to the mayor's credit there, they said more right things than usual. And she stepped down and they immediately charged her. There have been so many times when a city doing that would have made a difference in terms of, rioting and protesting, when that hasn't happened. And I think maybe some jurisdictions have started to figure this out, that you actually have to, make a press conference. Like Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, and Adam Toledo's family, like basically pleaded with the city of Chicago not to riot too hard and make this a bigger problem than it already is. And while that's kind of empty, it's probably the right thing to do.
I hate it when you have a very reasoned response to my emotional response.
Well, it's not because I'm not emotional. It's just like...
No, you're better at it. Speaking of people who should hold a fucking press conference.
Yeah.
Let's get back to hockey, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
And Digit Murphy.
Yeah. No peep out of her.
She who should be the former head coach of the Toronto Six is still silently sitting in her transphobic world, allowing the Toronto Six to make statements about, oh, she has left this group that has a long lineage of having transphobic stances.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't come out and said, you know what, actually, I realize the error of that group and the error of my ways, and I am going to become better as a person and try and learn and embrace these communities.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, she's said fucking nothing. She's just sitting at home, twiddling her thumbs,
twiddling her digits.
Twiddling. Fuck you.
Well, I think it also speaks to the economics of the situation and the power dynamic is what's going on. The Toronto Six is owned by the ownership group that owns a bunch of other teams.
Boston and soon to be Montreal.
Right. And
which becomes problematic when those ownership groups are not willing to come out and say, we do not agree with this stance. This stance we find inappropriate. Digit Murphy is no longer the coach of our team.
Well, and I think that's the problem is they seem to obviously have some people amongst them that support this stand. Trans women in women's sports has turned around and kind of re-exposed the turfs of the world that, have been ignored for a little while. That everybody's getting sort of the J.K. Rowling treatment. And so I understand that some of these people are not wanting to weigh in one way or another, but the NWHL is a publicly inclusive league, and that is in their mission, and that is something that they have paraded around. And so, they need to step up and take this seriously. And, we would love nothing more than them to put out a statement from Digit Murphy unequivocally saying my previous position was wrong. Like there is still time and room to come back from this error, but it doesn't look like that's happening. And that's the bummer.
In the absence of this, we have seen some players. We've seen I believe the Metropolitan Riveters come out and say, they stand with the trans community. We've seen Shannon Doyle, who plays for the Connecticut Whale, come out and speak about their sadness and their anger in the lack of response from the league itself.
Mm-hmm.
And, for an inclusive league to completely eschew one portion of that community that they're trying to make feel more inclusive.
Right.
It shouldn't take players standing up and saying this is wrong for you to make a statement. You should have a statement quickly, efficiently, and vociferously coming out against the transphobic stance of this group and the continued membership of Digit Murphy in that group. Well, and none of that has happened.
Now discontinued membership, but they haven't addressed her previous membership.
Right. The Toronto Six said, oh, she's removed herself from the group. She's not saying that the group was wrong. She's just not in the group anymore. And that's the point, is that the group is wrong.
I mean, there seems to be a little bit of a common thread in hockey leadership dropping the ball right now and outspoken players in the media saying things, getting things done. That's what J.D. Miller had to do about COVID.
Yeah, when one of your star players has to be the first person to come out and say, this shit that the NHL is asking us to do is inherently dangerous to us as players and as people. These are
specifically that shit being having them play 19 games in 31 days immediately after coming back from a rampant COVID infection that has left many players and their families with significant symptoms. Like, yeah, everyone in the media and hockey Twitter was bashing the Canucks and NHL and the NHLPA for not doing more about this. But it took JT Miller speaking out for anything to happen.
Yeah, and they sort of kind of changed. They delayed one game. They delayed 2 days for a team that still has numerous people on the COVID list.
Right.
Like Tyler Mott hasn't been on the COVID list for, I think, 5 or 6 days, and he's not able to play today because he's still dealing with shit.
Right. I'm okay with them playing with shitty players as long as everyone is healthy. But one thing we know is that coming back from COVID is not a linear progression. I mean, Mika Zibanejad missed, it seems like, a third of his season of functionality, even though he was on the ice after having a bad case of COVID.
Yeah, the Stars still suck. And they...
Right, no team has come back from a COVID infection better. I mean, that's where Buffalo's season went off the rails.
New Jersey, Philadelphia. There's a pretty obvious pattern here. And while we can sit here and say, well, the Canucks weren't going to make the playoffs anyways, technically they were in the hunt.
Yeah, they were scratching at the door at least.
But now they don't have a chance because the entire team has been washed over by this virus that has killed over 3 million people worldwide.
Yeah, and several of them are said to have been having really bad symptoms, and to turn around and then make them play professional hockey in such a short order.
One of them
seems ridiculous.
The doctor had to go to their house and give them an IV. That's not something that happens on a normal case of the flu. Maybe what the theme of today's episode is a dearth of leadership in the world. The NHL went maybe 2 months where they were doing a really great job with COVID. They revised their protocols after everybody and their mother got sick. Literally their mothers got sick. And we had like a 2-month break there where they were doing pretty well. And then it was like the NHL was like, oh man, we've built up some good karma, some good, you know what we're going to do? We're going to fucking waste all of it. Hey, Vancouver, guess what? You're coming back and we're just going to run you through the grinder afterwards.
I have one concept of a proposal, I guess, is to have the Canucks play all of their games against playoff teams relatively on time or before the end of where the regular season ends. That's for purposes of league integrity and playoff seeding. And, if they're going to play, let's make this a little bit easier and space out some games. And so to that end, take the pointless 4 games against the Senators, the 2 bottom teams in the North Division playing against each other, and let's put them during the playoffs. No one is going to care if you have an undercard game before a playoff game. If anything, more hockey, more better. And then while you're at it, they play the Calgary Flames just above them in the bottom of the standings right at the end of the season. So once the Calgary Flames are mathematically eliminated from playoff contention, which at this rate probably won't take too terribly long, start moving those games back. Start spacing them out. Give this team time to practice. The players do have a bit of an incentive to play these games in that they want to amass stats. They want to amass games played for their contract metrics, and they want to, get paid and get experience because a lot of these teams have very young developing players. So if you're going to play the games, let's space them out.
We are also not mentioning the fact that the Avalanche just got shut down. They have, I think, 3 players on the COVID list right now and are not playing through at least Tuesday. Or there's a handful of players on the COVID list in Colorado right now as well. We hope that they are able to get back to full health. I mean, Grubauer was having his best season as a professional this year, and it's really too bad to see that derailed, much like every other season that has been derailed by COVID this year. Right. I mean, Evan and I are sitting here talking about hockey, but we also understand that hockey isn't important. We can say that. We're not in Canada, so we can say that. But
I was going to say, the Canadians are sharpening their pitchforks.
Yeah, well, I mean, only 2 of them have ever listened to us, so that's fine. It's hockey is a game, and people's lives are not. And so let's take the time to let these people heal. And if they are able to play hockey once they're healthy, cool.
Mm-hmm.
But we also shouldn't get them healthy and then run them through a gamut that's going to run them back into the ground. You know, we've been talking about some awful shit for the last hour or so. So we're going to lighten it up again a bit, and we're going to bring out the yawn scale that you have grown accustomed to the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about what happened right at the trade deadline, because we recorded last week on a Sunday, and then a lot of things happened immediately after we recorded.
So yeah, David Rittich was traded to Toronto from Calgary for a 2022 third-round pick. And this was one of the more awkward trades, not because of the trade itself, but because of the product of it.
Yeah, so David Rittich traded from Calgary to Toronto immediately before Calgary played in Toronto. So he actually had to fly along with his old team to Toronto, and then immediately started against them. And if you
in his old pads,
yeah, I was gonna say, and his equipment strangely had red hues while his uniform was blue. And I think he actually came out and said he got kind of confused.
Yeah, he did.
Because he played the puck behind the net, and he said he got scared seeing blue players, and then he was like, oh, wait, I am blue. It was kind of a bit of a love fest, though, because I guess on this plane ride, you know, his ex-teammates all got to kind of hang out with him and say proper goodbyes, and that's something that doesn't exactly happen in the trade deadline scenario, and especially now with COVID. So kind of glad that he got to see that. And then my favorite is when he's playing for Toronto, you know, like a true professional, just takes a whack at Matt Tkachuk's feet.
Yeah. Oh, he's finally on the other side of it. He's like, so this is what, oh my God, this is fucking terrible.
And then didn't he like give a playful elbow on, like, he was like switching sides or something at the end of an intermission, and like he's going past, I think it was Johnny Gaudreau, and he just like gives him a little shot, like as a joke.
Yeah. He was skating past and was kind of like elbowed his way past.
It's fun, cute, just good, clean fun.
Probably 4 yawns though. I mean, backup goaltender. Maybe 3.
3 because he's a decent backup goaltender.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Toronto now has like 7 goalies or something.
Right. Toronto and Colorado sort of have the same situation of a bunch of
mediocre to okay.
Yeah, mediocre to okay goalies, and you just wonder how that's going to play out between now and the playoffs, because, you know, they're both incredibly offensively talented teams, but somebody's got to keep the puck out of the net in theory.
I believe it's going to play out with waivers. Waivers. So yeah, we'll give it 3 yawns.
I think so. I think he'll play.
Well, he'll definitely play. Jack Campbell has been kind of spotty his last 2 starts. Mm-hmm. Frederik Andersen is probably out for the year.
Yeah, sounds like it. The interesting thing about David Rittich is, like, why didn't Colorado do this? You know, go for him instead of Dubnyk or Jonas Johansson? That
is Joe Sakic's blind spot. He's like, look at this team I've built. Well, sir, we should address the goalie situation. What is this goalie you speak of?
Who are these strange men in back?
Yeah, why do they wear so many pads? Are they afraid?
Why are they all crazy?
Well, he also played with Patrick Waugh, so maybe he's just fucking over it.
Yeah, maybe he's just scared of goalies. He just like doesn't go to the goalie room.
Yeah.
He like walks past the goalie room. He's like,
well, I think he had to fire Patrick Waugh as coach of the Avs too.
Oh yeah.
Ever since then, he's just been scarred.
That would scar anybody.
Moving on, Braden Coburn. This is a 5 yawn trade, but so Braden Coburn from Ottawa to the Islanders for a 2022 7th round pick.
Yeah. 5 yawns.
Yeah, 5 yawns feels like doing Coburn a solid, maybe. I don't know.
Right. Was he even playing?
No. And he was traded. He was traded from Tampa, where he kind of played, to Ottawa, where he was barely playing, to the Islanders, where he probably won't play that much either, but he might get his name on the cup, so that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a war of attrition in the playoffs, and, you know, he's a defensive defenseman, so he could see the ice and maybe do some good stuff, but Yeah, probably a 5-yawner.
Interesting that the 2 players that Tampa traded to Ottawa for cap relief this past offseason have now both been traded.
Yeah. I mean, I think that speaks to, I don't know, what Tampa is and how shrewd Julian Brisebois can be.
He's a Sith Lord, but that's okay. He is the Sith Lord to Steve Yzerman's Jedi.
You got to have 2 sides of the Force.
Opposite sides of the Force, yes. The next trade, Mike Riley from Ottawa to Boston for a 2022 third-round pick.
Now Boston has a defenseman that I can name.
They have one defenseman who is healthy.
Yeah, because Gerslick's still out.
He's out-ish.
Okay.
This is probably 4 yawns for me. Mike Riley is okay.
Yeah.
But like,
he's a guy. He can play.
He will probably play a very significant role for Boston, but not because he's great.
Just because
they don't have anybody alive.
Yeah, they have such a bare-covered defenseman. Like, we'll get to their amazing forwards in a bit, but when people just like name the starting defenseman for the Boston Bruins, it's like, it's just some guys.
They could legitimately just say names and people would be like, oh, when they bring him in, they'd be like, and Toots McGillifart here is on the second pair. And they'd be like, oh, I've heard good things about him in the AHL. What a pickup by, was it Don Sweeney is the GM there? The next one here was probably one of the like more out of the blue trades. I mean, Jeff Carter was somebody who could have been traded.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not thoroughly surprising to see Jeff Carter get traded
from LA to Pittsburgh
for a 2022 third round pick and a 2023 fourth round pick. Both of those picks have conditions, neither of which are important, which is to say that if Pittsburgh does well, those picks become better.
Okay. Was an interesting piece. You know, you sort of thought somebody was going to get jettisoned from LA. Like we had talked about Dustin Brown being a good replacement for Anders Lee. But yeah, to see Jeff Carter go, interesting.
Is Jeff Carter a 3-yawn trade? I feel like that's a 4-yawn trade. At this point in Jeff Carter's career.
I'll go 3.
All right.
Because, I mean, he's going to play real minutes in Pittsburgh, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially with Malkin currently on the shelf, he'll get a chance to play up the lineup quite a bit. But he's probably a third-line guy, middle six guy. Sure, 3 yawns.
So now we get to the big news.
That wasn't super big, but...
big-ish.
It was the second biggest trade of a otherwise lackluster trade deadline day.
Mm-hmm. So Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar from Buffalo to Boston for a 2021 second-round pick and Anders Bjork.
Curtis Lazar, I think, is a better player than we give him credit for, and I think he has a chance to really impact that bottom line in Boston.
Yeah, he looked good.
Taylor Hall is quasi-resurgent in Boston, probably because he's on a team that has a chance of winning at all. So.
And he's on a second line that has needed scoring for a while, but he's got Krejci with him, and I forget who
Craig Smith
on that line. So, you know, he lines up on a good line and also only has to play against a second defensive pairing now instead of a first defensive pairing. I watched the first game after him and Lazar got traded, and yeah, Lazar looked way better than Taylor Hall. Like, Taylor Hall's like, wow, you're pressing really hard, dude. And he's since got into the groove of things. He's got 2 goals and looks a little bit better. He's always been a play driver, but his finishing numbers are kind of...
He was shooting 2% in Buffalo.
Absolutely ridiculous.
And you know what? Anders Bjork, I believe, already has a goal for Buffalo. So, hey, cool. Have fun.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are super high on him, and hopefully something goes right in Buffalo, and so it'd be nice to see him be one of those things.
I'm guessing, I want to say a 2-yawn.
Yeah, I think 2-yawn.
Yeah. You know, if this was Taylor Hall 3 years ago, it's definitely a 1-yawn trade. Like, that's a super high-end player who is in his prime. Oh, Taylor Hall is, slipped a little bit. doesn't have the reputation that he had following his Hart Trophy year, obviously. It's 2 yawns, I think. The next trade is the saddest trade in Canucks Twitter land. Michaela Gaudette's husband, Adam Gaudette, is traded from Vancouver to Chicago for Matthew Highmore in a move that makes almost no sense for anybody.
Highmore's not bad, but he's just sort of a bottom 6 guy, and he's been in and out of the lineup. And a lot of people are qualifying this as Vancouver selling incredibly low on a player that they've drafted and groomed now for several years, who's a former Hobey Baker winner. And, he's not bad, but he's not to where he could be yet. And, he's probably tops out as a middle 6 guy. The knock on him, I think, is his skating. But I don't know. I'm super happy to see him become a Blackhawk. Highmore was liked and respected, but I think trading him and getting what seems like an upgrade of a player.
I'm going to say this is probably a 5 yawn trade, right?
I give it 4 just because it's my team and a player that we sort of follow. I don't know.
Our next trade is the Dmitry Kulikov trade from the Devils to Edmonton for a 2022 4th round pick.
Smart trade by both sides, but a complete yawner.
Yeah. Here's the silliest part about it is Ken Holland, after the trade deadline, people ask him, hey, you didn't really do much to address team needs. And Ken Holland's answer was, well, you can't go all in every year. You have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on your team. If you're not all in with 2 of the 5 best players in the world, who the fuck are you kidding? Why are you a general manager?
But they also did add a bunch of people in the offseason, right? I mean, that team makeup is quite different from what it was last year. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, but you're not right either. You're not wrong in the fact that there was a decent amount of additions to the team this year, but none of them were big. It was like Dominic Cahoon and not re-signing Andreas Athanasiou.
Right. Addition by subtraction.
Ken Holland is an awful GM is when he has to operate with a salary cap. I'm sorry, Edmonton, but you're never going to win with him as your GM.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
When Jim Devellano gave him the keys to a Cadillac, he managed to keep it from sputtering for a couple of years and then was just like, oh, well, this is over, and drove it into the fucking ground. This trade, I'm going to say 4 yawns.
Okay. Yeah.
No, we could go 5.
I go straight to 5.
All right. Yeah, fuck you, Dmitry Kulikov. This next trade, I think Evan is a bigger fan of than the NHL at large, and I tend to agree with him just because of the joy that are the names involved. That is from San Jose. Magnus Krona was traded to Tampa for Frederick Claesson.
Those are some good hockey names.
Yeah. Well, Magnus Krona is also probably the 4th installment of the Chrono Cross Chrono Trigger series.
I think he's a triple West Coast IPA.
And a delicious one at that. Probably
just really hoppy Magnus Krona.
Probably something brewed by like Stone.
Yeah.
He could also be a Bond villain.
Ooh.
Or
yeah, I think that. I think of like a Scandinavian strongman winner.
Without the names, this is definitely a 5 yawn trade for sure. Like, who has ever heard of either of these people?
Yeah.
But let's give it like 4.9 stars just because of the ability to riff on it for a bit.
Oh, absolutely. So 4 yawns. Carl Soderberg was traded from Chicago to Colorado, where he
back to Colorado.
Yeah, back to Colorado, where he's played for several years before this for kind of nobodies, but maybe prospects, and Josh Dickinson and great hockey name Ryder Rolston. Ryder Rolston, part of the great Ryder lineage of Ryder Strong of Boy Meets World fame, not porn fame, oddly enough. Ryder, I think, is the more real of these 2 prospects. He's playing at Notre Dame, which Stan is super happy to just acquire Notre Dame players.
Ryder Ralston is the most fucking Notre Dame name since like Connor McGarrick.
Yeah. Like I can see Ryder Ralston Sperry's.
Does he have red hair and is extremely pale?
Speaking of red hair and extremely pale.
Unfortunately, the flaming red hair of Sam Bennett no longer plays for the Flames, which was just a joke that wrote itself. Sam Bennett and a 2022 sixth round pick, were traded from Calgary to Florida for Emil Heineman and a 2022 second round pick. I think we're mostly just happy that Sam Bennett gets a shot somewhere.
Yeah, happy to see Sam Bennett play maybe where he's going to be valued. I mean, hopefully Joel Quenneville doesn't turn around and just like healthy scratch him a bunch like he does to some people, like Vinny Hinostroza.
Like a mini Torts kind of thing.
Yeah, if you're in Quenneville's doghouse, it's like famously difficult to come out of. And that's one of the reasons that you see this sort of Florida to Chicago pipeline is these outcasts of the stash. And Chicago's like, hey, well, we'll take him.
Yeah,
we'll see what we can do.
Heineman was a second round pick last year, so definitely some decent pedigree. You know, maybe Calgary's getting a real player there, and hopefully. I
didn't realize he was that high of a draft pick.
Yeah, 43 overall last year. He's playing in the SHL over in Sweden right now, and maybe 3 ons because Sam Bennett is included, or do we want to?
I think 3.
So last week when we were talking and we had a couple of trades pop up as we were speaking. They were these weird 3-way trades where a player was sent to another team so they could absorb some of his cap hit before sending him on to the final destination. In this one, Matthias Janmark went from Chicago to San Jose. San Jose then retained 50% of what was left of his salary and then sent Matthias Janmark on to Vegas. The Golden Knights ended up shipping out a couple of picks, a second round pick in this year's draft to Chicago, as well as a third round pick in this year's draft, next year's draft. They then sent a fifth round pick in next year's draft to San Jose for retaining some of Matthias Janmark's salary. Chicago also sent a fifth round pick to Vegas as part of this deal. So lots of flip-flopping, lots of jumping from city to city. That never happened. But in the end, really what happens is Matthias Janmark goes to Vegas for a couple of picks.
Yeah, and a second and a third for him is awesome. You know, to basically get for him what Buffalo got for Taylor Hall, like, awesome.
It says a lot about how far Taylor Hall's star had fallen, and also... Let's just say Vegas doesn't have the greatest history of winning trades. I think they gave up 3 picks for Tomas Tatar and then immediately sent him to Montreal. So like, regardless of who the GM has been over there, whether it's McCrimmon or I forget who it is now, they've been losing picks. And I know Vegas's like window is open now and has been open since they were created.
Yeah, which is such a crazy thing to say or think about.
And will not happen with Seattle. You know, their window is open now, so why not go for it? If you're not worried about future capital, you know, probably one of the 5 best teams in the NHL, you have a pretty good shot. Go for it.
Yeah. Whenever Alex Petrangelo's contract is in its later years, that team is going to struggle. But for now, buying Matthias Janmark is probably a pretty smart play.
What do we think? 3 ons? 3 because it's interesting trade.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of the players there warrants a second yawn.
No, I think
or a reduction of yawns.
Yeah, I'm going to go 3.
All right.
3 yawns.
I'm going to just throw this in 5th yawn territory. Maybe since it's a Chicago trade. Yet another Chicago trade. Maybe,
Stan's busy day.
Maybe Evan will disagree with me, but Madison Bowie and a 5th round pick went to Chicago from Vancouver, or went to Vancouver from Chicago for a 4th round pick. That says all you need to say about Madison Bowie is that it took also including a 5th round pick just to get a 4th round pick for him.
Yeah. He didn't play much. He played a little bit for the Hawks, but there was talk about him being like an expansion draft buffer. And now it sounds like they're going to dangle Calvin DeHaan instead of him. Yeah, while we're on the subject, we should just skip ahead to the Erik Gustafsson trade because he is also appallingly bad, but really good in the power play.
Yeah, so Madison Bowey, 5 yawns, also 5 yawns. Montreal gets Erik Gustafsson from Philly for a 2022 7th round pick.
I think this is a conditional 4-yawner. If he plays, it could be interesting. I mean,
but he's not going to play. They have so many defensemen there.
Yeah, but they don't have him. I mean, how you deploy an Erik Gustafsson in the playoffs is interesting because if you shelter him and make him a power play specialist, he's really creative. But yeah, he's just not he's kind of lost defensively.
Bouncing around, Toronto received Ben Hutton from Anaheim for a 2022 5th round pick. This is a 5-yawner.
Can we give it 6?
Also in the land of the boring, San Jose receives Alexander Barbanov from Toronto for Antti Suomela.
Barbanov? You mean like the shaving cream?
Yeah, it's like the
Russian shaving cream?
Yeah, it's like here in America is Barbasol, in Russia is Barbanov.
Yeah.
You put it on your face and it burns.
Yeah, it's actually adhesive.
Yes.
Antti Suomela, like, I think that's something you get from drinking untreated water in a third world country. Nashville gets Erik Goodbranson from Ottawa for Brandon Fortunato and 2023 7th round pick.
So Nashville, who should have jettisoned as many players as they could have on this trade during this trade deadline, picks up a useless defenseman and hands out a guy and a pick for it.
He's not useless. He's just boring. This is all speaks to the weirdness that their GM situation is. You know, as a team, they have had literally one GM and he is incredibly old. And so, you know, probably just forever in win now mode. Yeah, they should have sold. They had assets to sell. The Blackhawks could retake their playoff spot at any time if they really want to.
That would be kind of great. As much as I don't really want Chicago to make the playoffs, I would love to see Nashville be like, no, we're a contender, and then not make the playoffs.
Yeah.
It'd be even better if Columbus came out of nowhere.
That would be better.
Then Jarmo,
just Patrick Laine just goes psycho.
That
would be awesome.
And then GM Jarmo was like, shit, do we have to bring back Torts now? Oh, no.
No way that happens.
Also boring. Less boring. These next two picks next two trades are kind of boring, but Michael Raffl went from Philadelphia to Washington for a 2021 5th round pick. Okay. There's some bottom 6 for you, Washington. I think we're throwing all of these in the 5-yawn category.
This is just a one big 5-yawn.
Winnipeg got Jordy Ben from Vancouver for a 6th round pick in this year's draft. Winnipeg was like, man, we've got a great forward core and we've got a killer goalie. What should we do? I know. Let's save that back line by getting Jordy fucking Ben.
The Canucks were happier to see him leave than Winnipeg was to see him arrive.
Yeah, Jordy Ben showed up and they were like, you know, your brother doesn't go down on women, right?
I've always wondered, does Jordy Ben eat pussy?
What if like every time that comes out of Jamie's mouth, Jordy's just like, dude, bro, like, have you really don't like it?
Dude, you just gotta greet some pleats, man.
I mean, there's a chance that his first experience was with a unkempt pussy.
Oh yeah.
And that sucks. Like, let's be honest, like going down there and there's like a funky taste or smell and you're just like, nope, that could scar a man or a woman.
He probably just dated somebody that didn't like it and then he just never had to.
Or he's just really fucking bad at it. And so like the first girl he was with was just like, don't worry, you don't need to do that. And he was like, oh, okay. And then he thought that that's how every woman.
How awful would we feel if like he had some like underlying oral motor condition that like kept him from being able to competently,
like he gets down there,
he's like trying to, and it's just like awful and bad. Like he actually can't control his tongue.
His tongue can't come out of his mouth.
It's just he can talk. It's just it's stuck there.
Yeah, he's like he's in the bathroom like
doing tongue stretches,
trying to like get his tongue like it's like if only Gene Simmons were here. But
he's gotten surgery.
But it's Yeah, fuck Jamie Benn. If you're listening out there, if we have any young listeners out there, like when you get to the point where you're in a relationship, go down on your woman.
You don't even need to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
Just go down on your significant others.
Yeah.
Like
it's pretty great.
It does good things for everybody.
Yeah, everybody's happy afterwards. like nobody finishes that up with like the expected final product of going down on a woman. Nobody finishes that up and goes, I wish I hadn't done that. Nobody's like, well, that was a bummer. You're happy, she's happy. The pets that are awkwardly watching are happy. It's great. Anyways, yeah, go down on women. It's great.
So let's talk about the trades that we actually
care about.
Yeah, enjoyed.
The first will be, there's two more here. So the first is Anaheim receives Hayden Fleury from Carolina. Just saw your note for ice cream brand Yanni Hakanpää. Fuck you for sneaking that in. Well done. And a 2022 6th round pick. I really like this trade for Anaheim.
I like it for both of them.
Well, Carolina is going to lose somebody in the expansion draft, and they needed to be able to protect people. And so they got rid of Hayden Fleury, who they probably weren't going to be able to protect, and who, you know, to this point has, I wouldn't say he's been a disappointment. He just hasn't gotten a real good chance in Carolina because they have so many good defensemen ahead of him.
Yeah, he just hasn't gotten minutes.
Yeah, so
they have a logjam.
It's great for Hayden Fleury to be able to get out into Anaheim, a team that is young, is rebuilding, but has a very long history of drafting, training, and producing very good defensemen. They do a good job there. And for Hayden Fleury moving to Anaheim, that's a really good place for him to be as a young defenseman looking to make a niche for himself in the league.
Yeah, this is probably a good place to talk about why the hell didn't Anaheim, at the basement of the West Division, sell anybody? Like,
people have to want what you're selling.
They had assets worth selling. You know, what they have.
I'm going to keep this pause in because that just shows how little they had. They have Adam Henrique. They have
Getzlaf.
But maybe Getzlaf doesn't want to go. You know, like Adam Henrique's contract is bad. It's like 5.8 for the next 3 years after this year.
Oh, woof.
Jacob Silfverberg's contract is not tradable. Like they could have traded Ricard Raquel, but he got hurt.
They did kind of become a victim of timing there, didn't they?
Yeah, Danton Heinen is a tradable asset, but
what about the defenseman?
Well, they're not sending Cam Fowler anywhere. They had Josh Manson, and he was kind of rumored as somebody that could get traded, but you know, again, people have to want what you're selling, you know, and maybe Anaheim was just like, oh, we need all of this stuff for middling players, and it's like. No.
Yeah, the price may have been too high.
That Josh Manson probably gets traded next year because it's not like Anaheim's going to be good next year either.
That's true.
You know, but Hayden Fleury is a good player. He could become a very good player.
Right.
And again, Anaheim has that great track record of producing defensemen. So good for them.
And who they gave up for Hayden Fleury is a personal favorite of mine, Yanni Hakanpää.
Oh, what do we think about that trade? Maybe 3 ons?
Yeah, go 3 ons just because it's fun.
Yeah, and I mean, Hayden Fleury is a promising young guy. Yanni Hakanpää is a delicious ice cream flavor.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah. But then there was the blockbuster trade, which again is not a huge blockbuster, but it's a very big trade.
Yeah, I like it.
So the Detroit Red Wings traded Anthony Mantha to the Washington Capitals for Jacob Vrana, Richard Panik, a 2021 first round pick and a 2022 second round pick.
Mwah. Chef's kiss.
That's a good trade.
That is an awesome trade.
That's the trade that you try and make on NHL 20 or whatever, and the other team goes no, and you're like, are you fucking kidding me? That's a great trade. I'm going to say this is a 1-yawn trade.
I think that's exactly where I was going to go with it too.
I think Anthony Mantha and Jacob Vrana both have the talent to be first line players. Richard Panik is, I mean, He's at the end of his career.
That's
He's had a decent. Yeah, that was making the money work. Then you throw in a first round and a second round pick into the deal. Keep in mind, that's the only first round pick that was traded on deadline day.
Mm-hmm.
And one of I think 4 to be traded overall.
And the second pick is next year, where it's going to be more useful.
Well, and next year is considered a very deep draft. Mm-hmm. Let me lay it out from this is again my Red Wings perspective. Anthony Mantha is a very good player when motivated. We've seen that in the 4 games he's played in Washington since being traded. He has 4 goals and an assist. He looks like a brand new guy compared to the guy who was farting around Detroit for the entire year.
He's got a new lease on life.
He's kind of recaptured that goal scoring prowess that he had when healthy last year, where he was on I think he was on a 75 point in an 82 game season pace, which is a legit first line forward. You've seen the type of things that he's tried to pull off since he got to Washington. Mm-hmm. He was not trying that in Detroit at all this year. He would skate into a defensive trap and just give the puck away and then maybe skate back to his defensive zone. Mm-hmm. He immediately scores a couple of highlight level goals where he uses his stick handling, uses his hockey IQ to get himself into great places to score. And he looks like the player that Detroit always thought he could be. And there are going to be fans both on the Washington side who say, well, this proves we won this trade, and on the Detroit side who say, oh my God, I can't believe we gave him up. But that's not the point of this trade. The Wings are going to be bad probably for another couple of years, and their hopeful window opens in probably 2024. Yzerman has said since he got back, this is going to take a while. This is going to take patience. I'm asking you to be patient. Trading possibly the best player on your team shows that Yzerman is playing the long game. Mm-hmm. The reason this trade works for Detroit is they trade Anthony Mantha to a team that is a contender where he can possibly win a cup. The Wings got Jacob Vrana, who, despite being in the same draft year as Anthony Mantha, is actually 18 months younger. Mm-hmm. Mantha will be 27 in October. Thus, in 2024, he'll be 30, thus kind of putting him out of that window where you want him around when you're turning competitive. Do you want some veterans on your team? Sure. But at age 30, you don't know what Mantha is going to be. Dom Luszczyszyn at The Athletic, his models put him at 1 to 1.4 wins above replacement for that age. And when you're trying to build a contender, that's just not who you want around on a $6 million a year salary.
Right. If they play all their cards right, they'll have turned Mantha into 3 good players.
Right. So that's the point here. Jacob Vrana, as far as scoring this year goes, can in theory replace what Anthony Mantha was bringing to the Detroit Red Wings. Is he the same level of player as Anthony Mantha? No, probably not. He's very good. Mm-hmm. I don't think his ceiling is as high as Anthony Mantha's, but it's pretty high. He's going to get first line minutes, which he never got in Washington. Right. So in the meantime, you got 2 high quality draft picks out of this. And all you really had to do was eat a couple of years of Richard Panik's salary, which isn't that bad. It's 2.3 something.
Yeah, and he's not a terrible player. He'll fill out your bottom 6.
Yeah, he'll definitely play in Detroit for the next couple of years while we're trying to get out of this pit that Ken Holland dug for us. Good luck, Edmonton. People were saying oh, Detroit fleeced Washington. Yeah, maybe this, if you look at trade models for wins above replacement, Detroit absolutely fleeced Washington in this deal, but I don't think that tells the whole story here. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good trade for Detroit to get a bunch of assets for a guy who might not be around when your window of contention reopens. You bring in a relatively solid replacement for him, and you get 2 very high-end picks. Now, granted, those picks are going to be towards the end of those rounds, but it's more ammunition. Mm-hmm. And the Red Wings now have 12 picks in the first 5 rounds this year.
Holy wow.
And 10 picks next year.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's after. So by the end of the 2022 draft, Detroit will have made in 4 years, 6 years worth of draft picks. So when you're a team that needs prospects and needs talent and elite and needs those kinds of resources coming through your pipeline, you've given yourself as many chances at success as possible. And that's what Detroit needs right now. So I think this is a great trade all around. It frees Anthony Mantha to go play in a team that is contending. And he's, again, 4 goals and 1 assist since he got there. He's playing great. And it gives Detroit a lot of flexibility moving forward. And so I think this is a one-yawn trade. It's clearly not a generational talent like Gretzky to LA trade, but it's two first-line capable players and high-level draft picks.
Yeah.
So I know I've been waxing about this for a while, but I think it's a great trade. It's a great NHL trade. We don't see these kinds of trades that often in the NHL.
It's a good hockey trade.
Yeah. And so like let's just kind of enjoy the fact that like Stevie Y is a fucking Jedi. And
we get to see Mantha, play on full power like we've kind of wanted him to.
Yeah, he gets to, play like a big boy.
Speaking of playing like a big boy, by the time that you listen to this, Patrick Marleau will have broken Gordie Howe's record for most games played in the NHL. He's done so in less than spectacular fashion, kind of limping to the finish line, playing blah minutes for bad teams. But, he's done it in the current salary cap and competitive era. And, hats off to him for just surviving this long and, giving us the good play that he has at times. And also, he looks the same as when he came into the league.
In his face, not in his capabilities or ability.
No, but
he's washed up.
Yeah, he is.
He's been washed up for 3 years.
Oh, yeah. He's bounced around, and like San Jose
he's played for like 4 teams in that time. Like
they made a big show out of bringing him back, and people were like, "Why?"
I'm sorry. I hate this. I hate that a washed up fogey is breaking a record of one of the legends of the NHL and is only playing the game because of the record.
Right.
He's of no further use to a team. He has 8 points playing on like the second line in San Jose. He's useless right now.
John Tortorella, if he was his coach, would have just healthy scratched him. Just be like,
so did Mike Babcock. Mike Babcock,
you're done, bud.
Yeah, Mike Babcock fucking benched Mike Modano instead of letting him play his 1,000th game or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's some bullshit. Like I'm glad Patrick Marleau's got the record. Cool, whatever. But
records are made to be broke.
No, this is Gordie Howe's record, and Patrick Marleau might have it, but whatever.
Well, what Patrick Marleau does not have is Gordie Howe's 9 years in the WHA.
Exactly.
So it's not most professional hockey games played. It's games in the National Hockey League. Yeah. I mean, Patrick Marleau is 41, and you said Gordie Howe played till he was 51?
Gordie Howe played until he was 51 and had 41 points in his final season. Like, that's still a legitimate NHL player.
Oh, yeah.
He could have played longer if he wanted, and he was 51 years old.
But he did play in essentially a different...
Yeah, they played in a different era. Maybe it wasn't as hard on their bodies, but they also didn't have the training regimens. They didn't have the health science. They didn't have the sports science. They didn't have the padding.
Or the medical advances.
Yeah, like tearing your ACL in 1951 meant your career was over. Now you're out for like 6 months.
Yeah, I met one of the first ACL replacements in the world ever. I think he got it done in like early 80s or something. And, today ACLs are like, you get little dots where they do the laparoscopic surgery and like it's all robots and artistry. And he has like a giant zipper on his knee.
Yeah, his scar is 3 feet long.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
But he's able to walk.
Yeah, I think that just speaks to how medical technology has changed in these intervening years. So hats off to Patrick Marleau, but Gordie Howe is still Mr. Hockey.
I think that wraps it up for us today. Thank you, as always, so much for listening and for sticking with us. If you have any feedback on any of these trades, if you disagree with our yawn scale, hit us up on social media. Email us. You can find us on the internets at handsomehockey.com, Handsome Hockey Podcast on Instagram, at Handsome Hockey on Twitter, or handsomehockeypod@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with us directly. We also have a Facebook page for Handsome Hockey. You can also find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast, Red Circle, or wherever else you find your podcasts.
It's actually on the Voyager satellite that we launched into deep space.
Somewhere an alien life form is going to come across us and be like, we need to burn that planet to the ground.
That's actually the plot of a Star Trek movie.
It is. It's Star Trek 17. But again, thank you so much for listening. Stay handsome, everybody.
Restez beau, tout le monde.